plains of Texas. How many of you have been through on I-40? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? It's just like a lot of flat. You can see Dumas, Texas, the water tower, the courthouse, the city park. You can see all of that, and Grandma's house is 50 miles from there. It's flat. So when they asked me what I'm going to do after I get out of high school, I said, I'm moving somewhere where there's trees. And so you can imagine my confusion when I got to Kentucky. So anyway, I got all the girls. Anyway, so I was driving around, kind of looking behind trees and stuff, and I pulled up to this place, and these fellows are working tobacco. I don't know if you ever seen anybody work tobacco. It's a crop here in Kentucky, and they were working hard, and it looked like they needed a break, so I walked out there to talk, and I said, how big is your spread? And this fellow raised up and wiped sweat, and he said, you see that sycamore tree? And I said, I do. He said, you see them two-seaters over there? And I said, I do. He said, you see that barn? And I said, yeah. And he said, you see that house right there? And I said, I do. He said, that's my place. I said, you gotta be kidding me. Why in West Texas we get in my uncle's truck, we drive all day long, camp out the next day, and we still ain't got across his place. He said, yeah. I had a truck like that once myself. I said, well, what do you boys do for work? And they said, well, we raise tobacco, sell a little bit of beef cattle, and we're guides. I said, guides? What's a guide? I said, well, a guide is we send off brochures down to Nashville and over to Louisville, Lexington, places where people have money, and they come out, we take them out in the woods and put them under a tree and tell them that we're going to run a bear or a boar or a deer by them. And we go back to cabin and drink coffee. I said, I can do a job like that. They said, well, can you shoot a gun? I said, no, I don't shoot a gun. They said, have you ever been lost in the woods? I said, man, I'm from West Texas, there ain't no woods. He says, have you ever been lost? And I says, well, no. I was confused once for 3 days. So what did you do when you was confused once for 3 days? I said, well, I sat down and called my nerve, and then I fired a shot into the air, and then I waited 30 minutes, and then I fired another shot in the air, and that fellow says, now right there's where you make the mistake. You're supposed to fire 3 shots in rapid succession. I said, give me a break, I just had 5 arrows. I said, well, that's a pretty good story, but go ahead and maybe you might turn out handy around the campfire. Well, come over to my house tomorrow morning about 10 o'clock, and I'll show you how to shoot a gun. We'll get you a brochure, and we'll get you to be a guide. And I said, that sounds great. You know, I hate to be late for a new career. So I was over there 4:30 in the morning knocking on the door, and he come out in his night shirt, walked me down to the well there and pointed at the ground. He said, there's the rabbit tracks. I said, no kidding. He said, and at the end of them is his breakfast. And he had this single shot, rusted out squirrel gun that he slammed in my chest. And he put it in my chest, and then he turned around and walked off. And I looked at them rabbit tracks, and I looked at the door, and I started following them rabbit tracks up into the woods. And I hadn't gone no more than about 100 yards when I heard a growling behind me in the woods. I turned around, it was a she-bear coming up the hill after me. I didn't know exactly what to do, so I started running, and I heard it screeching up the hill. It was a mountain lion coming down the hill after me. I didn't know really which one of them two to take on first, so I backed up next to a tree, doubled up my fist, and that bear come running up there with her mouth all open like they do, and I slammed my fist down her throat, esophagus, stomach, lower intestines, and out the other end. And I grabbed a hold of her tail and gave a wicked yank, turning that bear inside out, and she kept running, but in the other direction. I turned around to face the mountain lion coming down the hill, and no sooner had we made eye contact when she and I heard the wolves bearing down on us. I looked at her, she looked at me, we decided whatever our differences was, it could wait. We didn't waste no time. We built a stockade. And 8, 10, 12, 14 minutes later, all them wolves laid killed. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and we decided our differences was even. And I went on down the hill following them rabbit tracks, and she stayed right there finishing her breakfast. Now I came to this little trail. Y'all want to remember this trail? Now let me hear you just say, Thank you. I appreciate you participating with me. Let me try this one more time. Now let's do it together. Ready? Okay, now let's do it with harmony. You got it? No. So we Well, I want you to remember this trail, okay? Okay, and I came to this little bobbling brook, and there was a stream of water. I want you to remember this stream of water, and right next to this sawgrass, there was a little bunny rabbit. And I drew a bead on that bunny rabbit with that gun. And just as I was fixing to squeeze the trigger, I heard a yipping and a barking to my right. I turned and looked, and it was two little kid foxes. Awful cute. Had their eyes starting out of their head. Their mouth was all frothy. They had the rabies. I knew they were going to try to bite me. So I didn't know exactly which one to shoot because I had the single shot, rusted out squirrel gun. And then I spotted a rock, and I drew a bead on that rock and was about ready to squeeze the trigger when overhead I heard 6 Canadian geese and 6 mallards flying south for the winter. I was awful tempted to shoot them birds, but I determined to take the danger on first. Drew a bead on that rock, squeezed the trigger, and the gun exploded in my face. It was rusted out, as you will recall. When I came to, and this is nearly the truth, my right hand was on an otter's head, and my left hand was on a beaver's tail, and my pockets were so full of trout that a button popped off my fly and killed the rabbit. The barrel of that gun flew up and speared those 12 geese and those 6 mallards. I gathered them all up, took them back. They said I was a natural. And we made me a brochure. About a month rocked along there, and I got a phone call down at the Tractor Supply. I went down, my mother and me were having trouble with our cosigner, so I had to go down to the Tractor Supply, use the phone, and they, some of y'all get that when you're old. And it was the First Presbyterian Church at Nashville, Tennessee. Those men in the men's church that wanted to have a manly bear hunt retreat. Well, I had one naked bear on my property, so I told them it would be a cash, non-refundable deposit. They sent their money, and Mother and me spent it. That's what non-refundable means. And what we did is we took the chicken coop and we cleaned it all up inside, and we put the porch out on the front and put some windows in, and put the door, went down to the dollar store and bought some pictures of people we don't know. And we put them up on the wall and put a fireplace in there, a wood stove really, and a back door in it. And now if it was a little bit damp, it did smell a little bit of hen dressing.